Hello everyone, welcome to the next episode of Let's Design Diablo. This is episode 12, which we begin to work on that middle area. We've moved on from the skill areas on the bottom right and left, and now we're starting to work on that middle area where we talked last time about what it could possibly be. Some kind of place for information to be held for the player. Maybe definitely an XP bar, definitely potions have to go somewhere. So let's get into it and we'll see where it goes. So this is where we left off, and again, this is where when I made the initial post on Reddit where the design was at, and I really do like it. I think it's showing a lot of potential. We've solved a number of issues with the one of which was the gargoyle, or the angel and the demon, how they were before looked like they were sort of coming out of nowhere, cut off. We've solved that issue, and we've solved, or temporarily, good enough, I wouldn't say solved, but we have the, I think, skill areas icons in a place where they're good enough that we can move on to the next thing. A number of people have told me that they don't look finalized, maybe they don't look quite as modern as they should, and I totally agree. But for now, they're good enough for us to move on to the next thing. One thing that, before we get to the middle area that I'm working on, is if there's chewing in the background, that's my dog chewing his bone. But we're looking at, again, this issue of how the demon sort of is coming up from out of the background, whereas the angel doesn't have that look. She is more kind of straight on. So I think it was actually off stream. I rarely do anything off stream, but I think off stream I put a little bit of additional shadow on her wings and someplace like around her waist, so that it looks like there's more dimension there. I think it helps a little bit. Doesn't resolve the issue completely, but it moves the needle in the right direction. Again, maybe just good enough for us to be able to move on to the next thing, and that's what I'm doing now. If you notice, just putting some very subtle shadows in and around her wing and arm, waist, in that area to see if that helps. I think it does. We'll do this for a little bit, but the main part of this video will be on the middle area. It does. If you show it in high, you can see how having those shadows kind of makes her look a little bit more like the demon on the other side, just in the sense that she's coming again back out from background into the foreground. Initially, when I was designing this mana and health globe, I was a little bit concerned about too much of an overlap of the artwork onto the globe, like where his mouth is and where her arm is, because that's really important information, how much is in there to the player when they're playing. And then yesterday, I haven't played D3 in a number of months, but prior to that I played a lot of it. I never really noticed, but when I saw it yesterday, there's quite a bit, especially of the health globe, that's covered up by the, I think it's like a, sort of like a hooded angel-y type guy with a sword. So they must not be too concerned about that. And I think we're covering up a much smaller portion of it in this design, so I'm not as worried about that. Still looking at this angel to see if there's anything else we can do to make her appear to be, again, have a bit more dimension. I do think we get to the point where we just kind of leave it the way it is and start working on that middle part of the design. So this is the burn tool. The icon for that just looks like a little hand that's making like a C shape, and I think it's been a while, but back in high school when I did photography, I think that's because there was like a projector coming from above, and when you wanted to burn a part of the image, you would, I don't think you'd really use your hand that much, maybe you could, but where the light was projecting down onto the photo paper, you would create like a little circle area, and you'd move that whatever you were using around so that there wasn't like a hard line there, but it would burn in where the light was shining through. but not other areas. So anyway, a bit of an aside, but I think that's why the icon for that tool is what it is. Anyway, the demon, we're trying to clean him up a little bit. There's a bit of a line coming from something. I think there's a texture on top of him that was making that hard edge, which we definitely don't want. So just cleaning that up and making his wings look a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, it's in a pretty good spot, I think, now. And we're almost ready to just move on to whatever comes next. And just getting this gem arch on the right-hand side in the right place, and it's sort of curving back up a little bit there at the end, and we don't want that. We just want it to go up up above where the skill icon is. And so we're just erasing that part of it that we don't want. Yep, pretty good. Okay, cool. I think what I'm doing now is just talking through how to begin with this center area. Oh yeah, and we're looking right at this, at the texture in the back. It's sort of more gray on the bottom left, and on the bottom right it has like a reddish or bluish tint to it, and we don't want that. I think there was just ended up being like an effect. Yeah, there it is. When turned off, it now matches the left side. So that's good. It has less of a gold. I think I decided I liked it somewhere in between where it is and where it was. So we just modify that effect a little bit to make it still there, but much less. So looking at this middle part, what we really like about how this texture is coming up out of the background, just want to show a bit more of it, maybe move it around, see whether and how we start to define that center area. But again, this is we're sort of venturing out into the unknown here, which is cool. But it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to figure out how to do. It's just a matter of throwing some ideas to the wall, see what sticks. I think eventually what we do is bring in or show, that is, some different textures, some different rock texture to live back there. And one of the things we start to work on after that is how to define that area, how to bring it up out of the background, out on top of the gameplay area. What sort of borders and styles and ornaments do we use to separate it from the play area? Because right now it just sort of fades in. That's obviously not what we want. So just talking through it on stream and with the mouse, just sort of talking through how I see the shape, how I see that shape fitting in that area. Yeah, and I think what I was talking through here was how I see the background of other interface elements like an inventory or skill tree or something like that, looking, and what's the background material that those are made out of. And what I think we want to do is have the carry through this stone background, just like D1, D2, and D3 really. D3 a little bit less. We get some stone, but it's a lot of like stained glass sort of thing, which can be really cool, but is also very colorful and cartoony almost. And we don't want to venture that far into the direction. I do think stained glass can be a really neat idea, and it fits in with the Gothic theme that we have going. It's just a matter of how that's executed. You see, and someday I'd like to do a video and talk through just that cinematic, but in the Diablo 3 announcement trailer, there's a shot when it says where it says Blizzard Entertainment Presents, it's on stained glass. It is so good and spot on for what I think that like how you would want to use stained glass in a Diablo game. Eventually, when the game came out, I didn't really think carry that style through, but that's okay. Just when we look at that that shot from the cinematic, if we were to do like a stained glass background on any of the interface elements, that would be where I would look to start with. So what we're doing right now in the design is defining where the top border is going to be for this center area, and maybe we end up using that ornament, maybe not, but I'm seeing it come up a bit higher than the background for the bottom bar, and so you have the bar with a bit less height on the sides where it where the skill icons are, and then in the center it gains a bit of height there. I have no idea what Photoshop is doing right now. This is like an artboard tool or something that they added. Maybe that's useful to some people, but I really don't have much use. Well, I'm sure I would if I knew a lot more about what all the new tools were, but basically working with my decade-old understanding of Photoshop, I could easily learn more about it, but right now I just want to keep going with the design. But one of those new tools seems like is like an artboard tool, which I could see being really useful. Other Adobe apps have that tool, but I accidentally turn it on there and a few other times, if I recall, and it just makes the whole thing look insane. We're also noticing that Photoshop is starting to really struggle with the number of layers that we have in this file. So I don't know if we start in this stream or the next, but one of the two we go through and audit all of the layers, and I'm just going to talk through all that. I actually thought it was going to be much more of a boring process than it ended up being, and actually I'm still doing that, still in the process of going through all the layers here. But I was sort of wondering whether or not that would be an appropriate exercise to do on stream or to bring onto YouTube. But it really is, because in the process of going through all the layers, we show and hide and move around, and we analyze whether each layer should still exist. And a lot of them, yeah, but a lot of them, no. But in the process, a lot of new ideas come to the forefront. But anyway, we haven't started that yet. What we're doing now is thinking about using this texture as the background for that area. I really think it's a great starting point. There's still a lot to do, but it has a lot of interesting characteristics. It's dark. It's got a lot of cracks. It's I think the right overall idea for this area. But right now we're just erasing some of it that we don't want. And I do like that big, I don't know, the crack that's sort of at the portion of that background image that's above and to the right of the health globe. Once we put a shadow on the health globe, you'll see that really, that area really shine and come together nicely. And I think we're playing with hue, saturation, brightness to get it where we want it. We took some of the color away from it there because, again, we don't want it competing with the health or mana globe in color. It's almost as if this is a grayscale design, except for the health and mana globe. That's not entirely true. There are a lot of other colors, but it's fairly monochrome except for that. And that's the way we want it, because that's the part of the interface that has true relevance when you're, moment to moment playing the game. So we're working on this texture, or the shadow that's going to go behind the health globe. I think that's important because the health globe has to appear as though it's definitely in the foreground. So we're just getting this the way we want it. It's not carried all the way across yet, I think we end up just copy pasting, rotating, or whatever to get the texture to go all the way across. But it's it's a really good starting spot. Some of the some places in that texture were just a bit too bright, and although I like the contrast, how contrasty it is, this is going to be an area where the user has to be able to read text, I think. So we want to be a little bit careful, but it was still very early on, so we don't have to, go overboard in making this a background that can be readable. But we do want that. We want to keep that in mind. It shouldn't be too it shouldn't use too many colors, shouldn't have all that much contrast. So right now we're just weaving two pieces of this texture together, again in a way that it avoids looking symmetrical or duplicated. We really don't want, like I've said a million times before, we don't want anyone to know. I think this is when I started to realize that Photoshop was really having a tough time. Like, it was just struggling with this marquee tool here. But anyway, we really don't want anyone to know that this is the same texture that we just used a moment ago. So we just have to use different parts of it, change it so that you sort of fool the eye into thinking that it's different. It's not that hard to do, which is why when I see it in games, it's just entirely avoidable problem. So that looks pretty good. I'm really having a tough time moving this around because of how slow Photoshop is getting. But that's a nice part of the texture because it's very it's less dramatic. It's just very simple. But for now, I think we use it in about this spot. The shadow behind the health and mana globe looks really nice in that area. Happy with that. Now thinking about how the top of it's going to be bordered. It's sectioned off from the gameplay area. This is always a nice element to work with. It's the same one we have on the right and left. Thinking about whether or not there are going to be portions of that which would come above or below the texture. I think that can be an effective tool. It's just a matter of whether this is the right time for it, the right place for it. My dog's being weird. We always have this glow, always thinking about where we could use that. That's probably not the right place, but why not try it? Always just moving it around a little bit. Sometimes you just move something like that around and just hit on something. But I don't think we do here. Yeah, so that was a nice move. Bringing that other texture down, sort of evening things out a little bit, providing almost a background to the background. It seems like there's two types of stone in there now. One in the background, one in sort of the foreground. I think that's a really good place to start. And then also this texture, weaving it in and out of the background a little bit is nice. It sort of gives the appearance as though that ornamentation is chiseled into the stone. So I think we end up experimenting with that a little bit. But this is obviously very early going in figuring out what's going to happen here. It's not right yet. It's not balanced yet. I think it's too bright, too much contrast, and we don't know how text is going to live on top of that yet. But I think it's a start. And what am I doing right now? Oh yeah, I'm trying to figure. I kept pressing Shift, or no, I kept pressing like, and I do this all the time, but it's never been an issue. The key, the shortcut key for each tool. And usually I press it more than once. Like if I want to go to the arrow tool, I'll just press V, which is the shortcut for that tool. But I'll just press it like more than once. I'll just press it a few times. And for some reason, the Photoshop settings were set so that if you press it once, you go to the move tool, you press it again, it goes to like the other tool that's behind it. And I think that other tool that's behind it is maybe I don't know, definitely something I didn't want. So bad things were happening there, which is weird though, because I don't remember turning that feature on. So I don't know. But nope, here we go with yeah, so behind the move tool is that artboard tool, which causes everything to go completely haywire. So we're having a bit of technical difficulties this stream a little bit, but nevertheless, I think we made some, or are making some decent progress nonetheless, and it starts to get better soon. I think I'm trying to look to see how big the file is. It gets over 2 gigs, and at that point, for a screen resolution file, that's extremely big. So we that's when we decide to undertake a cleanup of the layers. Yep, there we go again. Yeah, every time it does that, I sort of freak out because everything just starts to look horrible. So yeah, this could be an appropriate place for the gem march, but we're already using it in 2 places, and it's not working for some reason. So I abandoned that pretty quickly. I think we actually end up using, if not in this video, the next, we end up using those horns you see in the top left right now as a way to section off. It's a way to complete that border on the top right and top left. I think it's in this video, but it might be the next one. I'm darkening some areas that are a bit too bright, and just recognizing that this is going to be a part of the interface again, which is going to display information to the user. So we have to be pretty modest about the kind of textures that we're using. I'm thinking about how this is going to I'm thinking like there's going to have to be something else in front to provide like a rectangle where words could be, or text could live. And so just again looking at that square as maybe that border, but we don't end up going in that direction. Thanks for watching this video. It's exciting to be able to move on to a new part of the design, although it's a little bit intimidating also because it's like a blank page and you have to start from scratch. But we got a good jump on it, and we'll continue to work on it in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.